Da Vinci's Ghost, Genius, Obsession, and How Leonardo Created the World in His Own Image, by Toby Lester. Narrated by Stephen Hoye. Copyright 2012 by Toby Lester. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with Toby Lester and the Sagalin Literary Agency, and was produced in the year 2012 by Tantor Media Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Preface. This is the story of the world's most famous drawing, Leonardo da Vinci's Man in a Circle and a Square. Art historians call it Vitruvian Man, because it's based on a description of human proportions written some 2,000 years ago by the Roman architect Vitruvius. But not everybody knows that name. When I mention it to people, they often react with a blank stare until I start to describe the picture. Then invariably their eyes light up with the spark of recognition. "Wait," one person said to me, "the guy doing naked jumping jacks?" Call it whatever you like, but you know the picture. It's everywhere, deployed variously to celebrate all sorts of ideas. The grandeur of art, the nature of well-being, the power of geometry and mathematics, the ideals of the Renaissance, the beauty of the human body, the creative potential of the human mind, the universality of the human spirit, and more. It figures prominently in the symbology of the Da Vinci Code, and has been spoofed gloriously on The Simpsons. It shows up on coffee cups and T-shirts, on book covers and billboards, in movies and online, on corporate and scientific logos, on international spacecraft. It even appears on the Italian €1 coin, guaranteeing that each day millions of people will hold it in their hands. In short, it's a worldwide icon of undeniable reach and appeal. But almost nobody knows its story. I first began to get interested in that story while at work on my previous book, The Fourth Part of the World, 2009, which tells the story of the remarkable map that in 1507 gave America its name. In writing that book, I delved deep into the weird and wonderful world of early maps, geographical ideas, and visions of the cosmos. And one day I stumbled across a medieval world map that immediately grabbed my attention. What struck me about it was what strikes everybody when they first see it: its uncanny resemblance to Vitruvian Man. This map is the Lambeth Palace world map, circa 1300, inscribed in a circle and a square. Christ embodies and embraces the world. The more I studied medieval manuscripts, the more I came across similar images, in maps of the world, diagrams of the cosmos, guides to the constellations, astrological charts, medical illustrations, and more. Leonardo, I began to realize, hadn't conjured up Vitruvian Man out of the blue. The figure had a long line of predecessors. I discussed Vitruvian Man briefly in The Fourth Part of the World, in the context of medieval and Renaissance mapping. The picture occupied only a peripheral place in the story I was telling, and soon I had to leave it behind. But as I moved forward, I found myself glancing back in my mental rearview mirror at the receding form of Vitruvian Man. What else might be embedded in that picture? What forgotten worlds might it contain? What sort of a window on Leonardo and his times might it provide? Why had nobody ever tried to tell the picture's story? Soon enough I was hooked, and the result, some 2 years later, was this book. On the surface, the story seems straightforward enough. Writing at the dawn of the Roman imperial age, Vitruvius proposed that a man can be made to fit inside a circle and a square, and some 1,500 years later, Leonardo gave that idea memorable visual form. But there's much more to the story than that. Vitruvius had described his figure in an architectural context, insisting that the proportions of sacred temples should conform to the proportions of the ideal human body, the design of which, he believed, conformed to the hidden geometry of the universe. hence the importance of the circle and the square. Ancient philosophers, mathematicians, and mystics had long invested those two shapes with special symbolic powers. The circle represented the cosmic and the divine. The square represented the earthly and the secular. Anybody proposing that a man could be made to fit inside both shapes was therefore making an age-old metaphysical statement. The human body wasn't just designed according to the principles that governed the world. It was the world, in miniature. To an almost astonishing degree, this idea, known as the theory of the microcosm, was the engine that had powered European religious, scientific, and artistic thought for centuries. And in the late 15th century, Leonardo hitched himself to it in no uncertain terms. If the design of the human body really did reflect that of the cosmos, he reasoned, then by studying it more carefully than had ever been done before, by using his unparalleled powers of observation to peer deep into his own nature, he might expand the scope of his art to include the broadest of metaphysical horizons. By examining himself in minute detail, he might see and understand the world as a whole. Vitruvian Man sums up that dream in powerful visual form. At a superficial level, the picture is simply a study of individual proportions, but it's also something far more subtle and complex. It's a profound act of philosophical speculation. It's an idealized self-portrait, in which Leonardo, stripped down to his essence, takes his own measure, and in doing so embodies a timeless human hope, that we just might have the power of mind to figure out how we fit into the grand scheme of things. The story of Vitruvian Man is actually two stories, one individual and one collective. The individual story, of course, is Leonardo's own. Set in the years immediately leading up to 1490, it's the story, as best I've been able to reconstruct it, of how Leonardo came to draw his famous picture, and it's a surprisingly unfamiliar tale. Like Vitruvian Man, Leonardo himself has become such a popular icon, deployed for so many different purposes, that he's rarely encountered as an actual person. Instead, he's almost entirely a creature of myth, a prophetic, magus-like figure invested with almost superhuman traits, who completely transcended his age. As one modern historian has put it, echoing the words of countless others, Leonardo, the complete man of the Renaissance, paces forth, as far removed from medieval man as imagination can conceive. But that's not the figure you'll encounter in this book. The Leonardo who drew Vitruvian Man turns out to be every bit as medieval and derivative as he is modern and visionary, and he's all the more complex, fascinating, and mysterious for that. The second story unfolds on a much broader scale. It's the story of how Vitruvian Man first came into being as an idea more than 2,000 years ago, and then slowly made its way across the centuries toward its fateful encounter with Leonardo. It's a saga of grand proportions, spanning centuries, continents, and disciplines, in which people and events and ideas tumble into and out of view. The architect Vitruvius, age-old theories of the cosmos, ancient Greek sculptors, the Emperor Augustus, Roman land surveying techniques, the idea of empire, early Christian geometrical symbolism, the mystical visions of Hildegard of Bingen, Europe's great cathedrals, Islamic ideas of the microcosm, art workshops in Florence, Brunelleschi's dome, the humanists of Italy, court life in Milan, human dissections, Renaissance architectural theory, and much more. At times the story ranges far afield, but never, I hope, without good reason. Each new episode and each new chapter is designed to help put Leonardo and his picture into deeper perspective. By definition, the two stories start out at a considerable remove from each other. I've constructed them in very different ways. One as a personal story, told at the ground level, and the other as a story of ideas, surveyed from a considerable altitude. But as the book progresses, the two slowly wrap themselves around each other until, in the final chapter, they become one and the same. This way, please. One damp, cold morning in March, a security guard at the Gallerie de l'Academia